welcome to The Reluctant Agilist. My name is Dave Prior. I'm here with Val Hinze. Val, thanks for taking time out of your day.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to be here.
We're going to talk about the session you're going to be leading in a few weeks when we meet in Austin for the Digital PM Summit. And I'm very curious about how you've made the model of the PMO work in your organization. But before we jump into all that, would you mind giving like a quick explanation of when the radioactive spider bit you and what turned you into this dysfunctional career path of project management?
That's a great question and a great way to phrase that. So I was actually working in an association, and we went through a digital transformation project.
Okay.
And we happened to be working with the company that I work for now, Mighty Citizen. And I just kind of saw that career path in a way that I hadn't before. It's not really something that they tell you in college or in high school. You could be a project manager.
Oh, really?
But through that project, I think I really just kind of saw the skill set and saw the career trajectory and found that I really like the digital side of things.
Okay.
And so that's kind of where it went from there.
So what's your favorite part about the job?
So I really like the client relationship piece, I think is really important, but I also like the team relationship piece. And so kind of being able to meld those two things together, I think is fun. And it also kind of brings in like a caring side of things because you're caring for clients, you're caring for the internal team, and wanting everything to come together in like a successful partnership.
Awesome. All right, cool. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to now promote your talk, Unleashing the Power of Project Management, A Path to Scalable Growth, which will be on the 15th, 4:30 to 5:20 p.m. Central Time in Austin at the Digital PM Summit, which is put on by the Bureau of Digital. And there will be links to that in the show notes, and there will be a little QR code on the screen where people can click on it and it'll take them right to that page. I'm very curious about this because when I think about PMOs, I think about groups that are really there for either governance or advice that is largely ignored in larger companies. And I'm not used to seeing the PMO show up in an agency model. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you got to that point where the decision was made, we need more than just a bunch of project managers.
Yeah. So something that's really, really important to us as an organization within Mighty Citizen is creating a structure where everyone can see their career trajectory. They can see, okay, beyond tomorrow, what am I looking at 3 years from now? What am I looking at 5 years from now? And I think that's really where some of our growth came from, because we want to create this environment, not just that a PM is a PM in that role, but a supportive structure where they have what they need to be successful. And they can also see, okay, in the future, I know I have these options within the organization in terms of growth. So I think that's really, it really came from a place of needing a leadership structure, but also just wanting to really create a great work environment for everyone involved.
Okay. So I'm going to poke at it a little bit because I'm trying to relate it back to when I worked in agencies, and it was very different. We were basically like batteries that were to be used up and thrown away. If I'm a project manager that starts out at your company, like I'm learning about project management while I work there, obviously there's a couple of years where I'm going to be spending time like learning enough about the craft. What in terms of longevity, like what is the path for somebody who's starting out in project management now? Like where are they going to go 10 years from now? What are they going to do?
So I'm actually going to take a step back from where you started from. And I think one other thing that's really interesting about our organization is that we have project coordinators. So basically that first step, obviously, sometimes we hire directly for the project management role, but you can come in as a project coordinator working directly to support a project manager. So beyond
That's
the
a great
project.
evolution. You get your feet wet. Yeah.
Right. And it's part of that trajectory that
Okay.
we were talking about, right? So project coordinator to project manager. We also have junior and senior kind of pieces of that role.
Okay.
And then we also have associate directors. From the
Okay.
associate directors, we have the director up to VP, but it really is a full career path as opposed to, project manager, senior project manager.
Yeah.
Now you're
Done.
moving to
Yeah.
another organization,
Yeah.
basically.
Okay. That's great that you provide that, you foster that, like that growth and safety, because I think that's kind of a rare thing to create that for project managers. Is sort of we'll use you until you start to get an eye twitch, and then we'll get rid of you and replace you with someone fresh.
Well, and that's where this talk really came from, is the fact that we don't talk about that. We talk about how can you be the best that you can be in the day to day? How can you best support
Show up.
everybody around you? We don't talk about how we're going to support you and that you're one of these beings that needs that trajectory, that path also.
Okay, that makes me want to talk about something completely different. So
Go
we'll
for
just
it.
follow it. So,
Sure.
when as a project manager, I know that you're very focused at Mighty Citizen from the project manager standpoint on servant leadership,
Mm-hmm.
and that is something that I feel like is part of a PM's job. In that, I show up to be there for my team in whatever capacity, whether I'm a project
Mm-hmm.
manager or scrum master, same deal. I show up. What do you need? Um, But one of the things that happens to people in that kind of role, whether it's in a project manager, scrum master, or a coaching role, we forget to take care of ourselves, and
Mm-hmm.
nobody cares about us because they're all taking from us and we're giving of ourselves to try to help other people.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do to either support people in that kind of role or teach them to take care of themselves?
That's a great question. And I think even with the answers I'm about to give, there's
Yeah.
still some of that. And I think it has to come from leadership in to say, how can I support you? You're supporting everybody else. How can
Yeah.
I support you? So I think that's a big piece of it. I think the other piece of it is really kind of turning it around to the team also to say, like, how can we be innovative together? Yes,
Okay.
I know what you need and I know what the project needs, but we need to work together as a team to come up with something that is going to serve both sides, right? A
Okay.
win-win kind of situation. So I think that's part of it also, as
Okay.
well as really creating within the project management office a culture of knowledge share, a culture
Mm-hmm.
of how can we be talking about the things that we're going through to help each other make it to the other side in, the best way
Intact.
possible.
Yeah.
Right.
So what's interesting, I did one other interview to sort of prep for the conference, and in both of them, there's this theme of creating a healthy environment for the people that are leading the project work, which is something, I mean, I just don't remember. That wasn't part of it when I was doing it. And one of the things that's interesting to me about the agency model is that I had been feeling like it hasn't really evolved since when I did it, because you're still sort of at the beck and call of the customer. The contract is still written in a way to try to protect the people, but when the customer takes 2.5 weeks to get feedback to you, you're still expected to jump that second, and everybody's on like 13 projects at once. But it sounds like within that context, there's a shift to create healthier, I'm going to use the word sustainable, but I don't mean sustainable in like an environmental way, sustainable in terms of people way.
Mm-hmm.
If you can comment on that, because it's just, I just like don't understand that at all.
I do think it's new. I do think that it is a conversation that we haven't been having.
Okay.
So absolutely, I think that's part of where that comes from. Some of the other things that I think that have evolved over time, well, and just to give a little bit of context, Mighty Citizen is working with mission-driven clients.
Okay.
So we're working with associations, nonprofits, government entities, higher
Right.
education, that kind of space. I think naturally coming out of that space, clients are more understanding. They're a little bit more, their budget is, I want to get as much as I can for my budget,
Right.
but I also really have this need that
Purity
I
of
want to make
intent.
sure, right, help
Yeah.
me talk about myself, help
Yeah.
me, so coming from that, I think clients, again, are a little bit more understanding, but we also build in protections in our scopes of work to say, hey, when this goes wrong, when you delay for 2 weeks,
Yeah.
you have to understand that we're not going to kill ourselves to make up for that 2-week delay. And I think that's something that is new also.
Yeah.
Is like,
well, I think adding the pause clause was a big turning point, but actually enforcing it is a completely different thing.
right. And so the goal is to build such a strong relationship with the client and build as much trust as you possibly can, and be constantly reminding them ahead of time, hey, this is going to happen. This is how we're going to address it when it does. And that way, when it does happen, we can say, hey, we had this conversation. This is how we're going to move forward. And ultimately, yes, it may affect your budget. It may affect your timeline. But I think that really strong relationship with the client and a really strong scope of work to back what you need to do to set up your project team members for success so that they're not working round the clock, is something that is somewhat new.
So it's more of like an actual partnership with
Correct.
With I'm the client, but I was going to ask you questions about how a PMO fits into client services or when with client services. But this actually makes a lot more sense because I'm used to it's very adversarial. The PMO was always viewed as the thing that was keeping stuff from happening. Where client services just wanted to get contracts signed and then, grind stuff out of people. How does it work within Mighty Citizen?
So within Mighty Citizen, our client services team is our project management office, and it is our client support team. So when I say client support team, I mean we do website redesign projects. As those websites are launched, the client support team becomes a dedicated contact for that client to keep maintenance, enhancements,
updates, whatever,
things like that, working. I think our setup is a little bit different because we also have within our organization an account manager. So our project managers are not account managers. They're also not sales. So if something comes through, say a scope addition on a project, they work with either the account manager or the salesperson to get that scope of work signed. So it is very much clear cut. Our project managers are managing the projects, managing the relationships. And then outside of client services is really who is doing the sales side of things.
So how do you define success from a project management standpoint? Like there was a thing, I don't know if you saw, but at PMI's conference last weekend, they redefined what a successful project was, and I'm paraphrasing it, but it was basically like if everybody said like, you got value, it was awesome, then it was awesome, but not tied to some of the old school stuff of like, on scope or in scope, on time, on budget. How do you define success for somebody in a project management role at Mighty Citizen?
I think it's exactly that. Is the client happy? Is the client team or the internal team happy? And did we do our best possible to make it on time and on budget? I actually get questions a lot from our internal team members who are not within the PMO asking, like, does budget come up in performance reviews? Are all of your projects on time, on budget? Does that come up in team member performance reviews? It doesn't. It's not a part of the review. Because what we're doing is we're talking about those things in the moment. As something is going wrong, we have that support system in place that your director is stepping in to help. The VP is stepping in to help anything that we can do to align with that project team to get to the best possible outcome is happening in the moment, as opposed to waiting for, all right, this is where we were at. Let's do a learning review about about everything that went wrong. We do at the end of projects do learning reviews, but they're very much focused on what are we going to do differently next time to continue to improve our process. It is not a let's talk about the fact that we didn't meet budget or meet timeline.
Okay. So I'm curious about, and this isn't a question I planned. It's just all come out of the stuff that you just said. I'm curious about those reviews, and I'm curious about what the PMO does to foster growth of somebody in that career path, a project manager. Like what do you expect of a project manager in terms of evolving at Mighty Citizen?
Yeah, so talking to the performance review side of things, we are collecting feedback from the project managers, project coordinators, directors that are most involved with that person. And then we're also reaching out cross-departmentally to say, hey, you've worked with this person closely in the last 6 months or so.
Yeah.
Do you have any feedback for them? How do you feel like they did on a variety of topics around, dependability? Did you have the information you needed to be successful in the project? Those sorts of questions. So that's really where our performance reviews are based around, is that internal feedback. And then we say, okay, for the next year, these are the most important things that came up. Let's work on those things together. I will say around project management growth, we oftentimes have growth areas that are around having difficult conversations, comfortability around whether that's with internal or client facing, comfortability in shifting projects, comfortability in supporting the team in the ways that they need to be supported. I feel like those are the majority of things. And then we're looking at, okay, as you become comfortable with that, how are you innovating from there? Are you trying new things on your projects to work with team members in the most efficient way possible? And I think it's really awesome to see somebody kind of have that mind shift change, because the feedback we start getting is like, well, this person said, what if we did it this way this time? And the project manager made it happen. I think that is...
So you're expected to run experiments while you're still delivering the work, because you're helping the organization grow as well as delivering to the client.
Correct. That kind of idea of continuous improvement and what can we do as an organization as a whole to continue to be more efficient and deliver a higher quality to the client.
Okay, cool. So I have two more questions for you. One of them is about your talk at the summit, because we haven't really locked in on that yet. What's the pitch to somebody? They're at the summit. What are they going to get when they come to your talk?
I think the main thing goes back to what I said at the very beginning, which was creating this structure that a project manager or a project coordinator can be successful and see that career trajectory. So what I'll walk through is, from the very beginning, where did we start out in terms of hierarchy and structure within our project management office, and how did that change over time? So I'll go through each kind of iteration that we have had. What went well? Why did we decide to move on from that structure, all the way to where we are today, which we do have pods within our project management office. And then from there, where do we see those pods growing in the future? How are we continuing with this kind of sustainable growth as we move forward? Because I think it's interesting that we talk a lot about how to be successful today in the role, but we don't talk about where are we going from here. And that's what I really want to hone in on, is like, your organization can have a structure that supports project management growth, here's how we've done it.
Okay. So I have another guy I work with on something. We always refer to ourselves as like Future Dave. What will Future Dave do? Yeah. Okay. This is great. So my last question, kind of going back to what we were talking about in the very beginning. What is your superpower as a project manager? Like, what is the thing that you have that nobody else has that the way you do?
Ooh, that is a tough question. I think with being at Mighty Citizen for going on 9 years now.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even think to ask you
Yeah.
about that. That's a long time.
It's a long
to be
time,
at an agency.
right?
Okay.
Right. It's actually really interesting. So I was the first project coordinator that we had.
Wow. Okay. So you've really been there and have shaped the whole thing.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So I've with the exception of the associate director, because I was a director whenever we introduced the associate director role, I've held every title within our project management office, which I think is
that's awesome.
Something that not a lot of people can say. So I think one of my superpowers is being able to look at what are we doing and in what way are we doing it, and making sure that everyone feels supported in that, but also saying, okay, let's try something new. Let's try to do this different.
The safety to experiment.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I think that really translates well to where I am today, which is really a strategic role continuing to shape our project management office and looking at the delivery side also. How do we deliver the best possible project to the client?
What's really interesting to me is yes to everything you said, but I think there's something larger that you're also a part of too, in that the PMO itself is sort of being redefined because of, what Agile did to it and what AI is going to do to it, and just how it functions in different organizations. And for the size you are, that you have a PMO with as many people in it as you do, that's a really interesting model. And it's a great way to provide a supportive, I just want to say non-toxic, healthy environment for the people working there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think so. One of the things that I'll touch on in my presentation also is, how do you make this happen? How do you do it from a standpoint of hours? From a standpoint of having this many team members, why do we have that many team members? And within our scope of work, how do we make it sustainable for the projects that are coming in?
How do you afford that?
How do we afford it? Right.
That's awesome. Well, I'm very excited to see you talking. I appreciate you making time for it. And for anybody who's watching, you should go to Austin for the Digital PM Summit. And you're speaking on October 15th at 4:30 p.m. Central Time. So they can come to your talk, and then they can go watch the bats come out of the springs, right?
Absolutely.
All right, cool. Well, thanks. And I'll see you in a few weeks.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks.